Welcome to First Builders, the podcast for those who shape companies from the ground up. I'm Amber Illig, founder and general partner at the Council Capital, where we invest in early teams solving critical problems in essential industries.
And I'm Rachel Tsui, partner at the Council. Today's a special episode. As you see, we don't have a guest on, and Amber and I are in the same recording spot today. And so we're going to be reflecting on our first year of First Builders and also just 2025 at the Council.
Absolutely. We're super excited to dive in. So let's talk about firm highlights first. So first and foremost, we're a venture firm. So many of you might not know all the things going on behind the scenes when you're listening to this podcast, but this year was pretty crazy.
Yes.
We had been working together for several years in various capacities, and then Rachel came on full-time as a partner in March, which has been huge. It's been crazy to go from a team of one to essentially a team of four between us and our assistant and then our head of community, Vanessa. So this year just felt like, crazy to see how much we could actually output. And then it was like, oh, it makes sense. There's like 3 or 4 times the number of people working on this now. So that was awesome.
And then also I joined on as we started to deploy Fund 2, which is super exciting. We've already made 4 investments into Fund 2 already, several of which are announced, like Knox Metals, Quintes AI, Rosarium Health, and then another one that's in stealth still. So haven't announced that one yet. And then I think the other thing that we've also done is also launch First Builders as not only a concept, but also a podcast with all of you on here.
Yeah. And I would say for both of us, it was really born out of personal observations. If I look back through my career, starting at really big companies like Apple and Eli Lilly, and then moving my way down to Snap, which was pre-IPO when I joined, it was post-IPO when I left, and then Cruise joined at employee 400, left at employee 2,500 when it was worth $30 billion. And then I was head of ops at a startup after that. But my 2 kind of favorite career experiences were those times at Cruise and Snap because the companies were just so different by the time I left than when I had joined, because they were just going through so much growth at that time. And so I think just looking back in my angel portfolio and in our Fund 1, seeing the founders that came out of the gates fastest and found product market fit fastest, developed really interesting go-to-market strategies. It tended to be these sort of first builders that had been at companies through high slope times. And then when we looked at the broader tech industry, we saw the same thing. We've been hearing about this PayPal mafia for ages, but there are so many other mafias out there. We frequently meet people from Uber that are still founding startups years later. Maybe they didn't even do that right after Uber, but they went and joined another company and now they're doing it now. And we see it from Flexport, from Anduril. We're just seeing this happen over and over again. Even just Airbnb, I can think of so many different companies where people joined early. They stayed for those crazy early years. They didn't opt out when times got tough. They took on more and more responsibility, and then they were really well suited to be founders after that. And I think you kind of got a First Builders experience too at Komodo before coming on here.
I did. So Komodo, I joined at Series B, and it was, I think, around 150 people when I joined, and I left when it was around 900 people or so. So definitely the same thing where every 3 to 6 months it felt like a completely different company, and helping to build out a new business unit, a new function. Had that same experience, and there are several folks that now from my Komodo days that have now turned founders as well that we've chatted with also. So
yeah,
definitely.
It's awesome. So we were looking back at the portfolio, looking back at our own careers, and we'd always said we're operators investing in operators, but that's not very specific nowadays. And so when we really looked at the detail of who we were investing in, it was First Builders. And so we decided to coin that term. We wrote a little article about it. We launched the podcast, and it ended up really taking off. And we've just been really thankful for all the guests that have been willing to come on. We've really had some heavy hitters on here, which has been awesome. I think we were able to interview the CEO of Hinge Health only 2 weeks after their IPO, when I would assume anybody would be, just recovering from the IPO roadshow. And then we also had Jack Greco, who's taken his company through a multi-billion-dollar IPO as an early founder on the team. And just so many others, folks that had their companies acquired by a company like Chime, and then later stayed at the company for 7 years and went through an IPO, and then early stage founders that we think are on the same track, but they all kind of have that first builder DNA, which is super cool to see.
Yeah, and we're just continuing to add to that first builder ecosystem too. So we also run an angel community called the Council Angels, and we're just continuing to add like more and more first builders just in that ecosystem where we now have over 200 members.
Yeah, it's incredible to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then in the portfolio too, as a venture firm, it sometimes feels like we are first builders now building this venture firm because it's very much a startup. I mean, from the outside looking in, you might not realize, but we're a tiny team and we have big goals. We want to be the top 1% at what we do. And this is the year where our results really started to show, because I think venture is tricky because it's not like you can set a quarterly KPI and then hit that KPI within the same quarter. You're really looking to hit like a metric called DPI, which is distributions to paid in capital, which is really like cash on cash returns to your LPs. And you really don't know for many years how you're doing in terms of achieving DPI for your LPs. And you have all these leading indicators you can look at. And this was the year that a lot of those started to really come to life in the same way that they did in my angel portfolio before. But it was just kind of validating because you set out to do this. I wouldn't have launched the Council Capital if I didn't think that I could be a top performer. But then you go through this period of time where you're like, I hope what I thought was right. And then now we've just seen so many wins in our portfolio, especially this past year when there were periods of time, even last year and this year, where it was tough to raise capital. And we still saw so many founders in our portfolio raising follow-on rounds. And I think, so this year we've had, Triley and Arvist raised their seed rounds. We invested at pre-seed. Dirac announced a follow-on funding from Founders Fund and Co2, and they have a new partnership with Siemens and a ton of things going on the enterprise side. We had GCAI and Flex both announced $60 million Series Bs. And these are all in just one fund, and then several others that haven't announced their rounds yet. So it's been really just cool to see that. And I was actually I grabbed coffee with somebody, one of our portfolio founders, over the weekend, and she was just asking like how I felt in this moment. And if anything, it just feels like validating because you set out to do these things, and just like founders, we have to do a sales process with LPs to invest in our fund, and we often get asked so many different questions about our portfolio construction, how we're sourcing deals, how we manage our partnership, et cetera. It's just a different list of the same questions that you would get as a startup founder. And it's easy to get in your head and be like, well, I'm just a number because all these people are evaluating me along all these other things. And then it was nice to see some things coming to life in terms of our kind of numerical performance and actually be able to attach numbers to it this year and see that, hey, like I wasn't crazy to go out and launch that fund. So it's been cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's been really just like eye-opening for me coming again from that operating world to the venture world. Obviously, you've been doing this for a little bit longer than I have, coming from that. But yeah, like you said, it's just like a longer scale time horizon, and the day-to-day is very, very different. So, but it's been really cool to do that. And I know one of the things that I've been excited about, as you mentioned too, was just like the fact that the two of us are able to tag team on different things and produce a lot more for the firm as well. I know you've visited and traveled a lot of different places this year. I have also, just like continue to build our brand. And I know you mentioned like one of the highlights for you in terms of travel this year.
Yeah, I would say there are two highlights. Like one, I was invited by another venture firm to go out to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which was a space I've always been curious about, but never really thought I'd get the chance to go, and was able to go out and speak there. And I was honestly just blown away by the ecosystem there of builders and just people with entrepreneurial mindsets. And it was just fascinating to learn about a completely different culture. And interesting that we invest in industrial tech. And when I went there, a lot of the industries around there that people are building startups around also have to do with logistics, supply chain, transportation, manufacturing, construction.
Everyone has the same problems everywhere.
Right? Exactly. So that was a really cool trip. And just like, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. First time I got to see that part of the world. And then the other one that was really interesting from a business perspective was Bentonville, Arkansas. Yeah, so I went out there for the VC Immersions program, again, just kind of with an open mind, and wanted to see what was going on there because Walmart, J.B. Hunt, and Tyson are all headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, if you didn't know. And what's interesting is, some of these larger companies, they require their vendors to have a presence there too, because it's such a large client for them. So you'll be walking down the street and you'll see like an office for Chobani and like different brands around there. And so it's really an interesting ecosystem, I think, for VCs to get plugged into, because there are some founders popping up in Bentonville, but also it's a really cool place for founders to get plugged into. because there are so many potential customers, and not just the big fish, not just Walmart, JB Hunt, and Tyson. There's sort of all these like mid-size and even enterprise level brands that are serving them as well that could be customers. So that's an area I think we'll be back in this year, and just learning more, because I think we believe at the council, even though we're based in San Francisco, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And for the folks that we've invested in outside of Silicon Valley, it's actually been really fun for us to be a bridge to Silicon Valley for them. So we love going to these parts of the United States where, there are things happening. There might be startups launching, and they're closer to their customer base than necessarily the tech talent or the VCs, and we can just help with that part. So
yeah. And I know like some of you are our top companies like are not in San Francisco or New York. So we have like quite a few in the portfolio that are like, everywhere else in the US, but even some of the top performing ones. So it's awesome. Cool. Well, switching gears a little bit, I know there's been a lot of different things that have happened over this past year, just in startup culture and tech trends in general. I feel like tech Twitter is always popping off, and lots of things happen. You go away for like a quick trip or anything, and you miss like a whole complete like moment. I remember you and I were talking about that before too.
Yeah, exactly. I went on a quick trip and I came back and Rachel's like, wait, you didn't hear about the engineer that was working for like 10 companies at the same time?
Soham Parekh. He went viral. He was called out by one of like the for joining like multiple Y Combinator companies, and just like, kind of like really putting out in the open what a lot of people in like Reddit have talked about of, people joining multiple companies and things like that, but him just bringing it to light, for sure.
And then I think we've just seen like multiple examples where PR has either been handled well or not so well, especially on tech Twitter. Like, there was the Coldplay moment where everyone, like tech people and non-tech people,
the whole world,
were literally, people were texting me. Usually these things are only happening in like Instagram DMs or on Twitter, but exactly. It's like family members, friends from college were like messaging me about this thing, and I'm like, if one more person sends me this video.
It was like super funny. I was like, and my mom, I remember she sent it like maybe a week after it happened. I was like, oh man, it's really caught on everywhere.
That's when
Yes,
exactly.
Exactly.
And then there was Bryan Johnson's love letter more recently, where I think his co-founder, did you see that one?
I don't think I saw this one.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Okay. We got to catch you up to speed. But him and his co-founder are dating, and he wrote this really like beautiful love letter on Twitter to her.
I need to go find this. I'm sure I can just like,
But I think his evolution too, like he went from somebody that everybody's like, oh, he's this weird biohacker, to all of a sudden like everybody's in his court because they're like loving this love story. And so it was just, it was funny, like another one. And then there've been these rebrands.
Yes. Yeah. The rebrand. I think the one that like people tend to hate them, but or hate rebrands in general, but then Cracker Barrel, like that's one that like went like super viral also. Like everyone's like, oh, you have to go back to the old one. This one's terrible. Like all of these things. So
people don't always like change. So I think there's a lot of lessons in all of these, in terms of how our listeners, whether you're founding a company or thinking of founding a company in the future, a lot to be learned in terms of how these were handled. So, and then on a more serious note, like as we think about like the 2025 market reflection, like I think we went into this year, and from talking with founders and LPs, everybody was so excited. I mean, there were things to be excited and things not to be excited about, but from a business perspective, everybody's like, well, we know we're going to get more IPO activity and more M&A activity. This year's going to be great from that perspective. And what happened? Dun, dun, dun. Not that. So we instead faced tariffs kind of right as we kicked off the year. And I think everybody all the way through the food chain, like again, like the founders, the VCs and the LPs, everything just kind of got like stalled because I think, customers of the startups and tech companies were also like a little bit nervous about how tariffs are going to impact them. And then VCs were nervous about how tariffs are going to impact portfolio companies and just trying to figure out like, is this shifting my thesis at all for this moment? And then LPs were nervous about investing in funds because they're like, where's the market headed in the next 6 months? And they're investing in multiple asset classes. There's a lot to consider. So,
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. I think people just like didn't want to make any decisions essentially for a little while because they wanted to see like where everything was going to shake out. But on a brighter note, I will say I think we've gone kind of like past that at least. And we've seen a lot of really interesting, I think, developments, especially in San Francisco. So both Amber and I are based in San Francisco. And so we've been here for a while, and during COVID and pandemic, like everything was just like emptied out.
Yeah.
I felt like a ghost town in here. But then this year was the first year where it's really felt like it's come back. Like there's traffic constantly in San Francisco. But there's like events, you're seeing people in the offices all the time. It's really coming from like the AI boom for sure.
Yeah.
Like everyone's coming back here to build.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a crazy time in San Francisco, and credit to both of us for staying through that trough period, where everybody was like, "You're crazy to be in San Francisco. Go build in all these other places."
Everyone moved to Austin and Miami, and
then full circle, we're back.
Yes,
so
exactly.
And then I think even on the IPO front, like we're nowhere near 2021, and we might just need to kiss that goodbye forever. But it has been cool to see, Hinge Health, Chime, and then also Figma. We have had some IPOs this year, whereas there was really nothing happening in previous years. So, and I think it's a signal to other companies that, hey, you might want to consider this. It's not that bad of an idea. And particularly for some of the companies that have been sitting on it for a while. Yeah. Like I think Chime and probably Hinge maybe could have gone public earlier, but it wasn't favorable. And I think it's kind of it just kind of opens up the opportunity for other companies to think about doing it. Even when they may have raised a growth round a while ago during different times, it just kind of normalizing it. And so I thought that was cool to see, and I hope to see more of it in 2026.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think like I remember even like Dan on our podcast mentioned that like it was great because they had they were cash flow positive, right? So they had really good business fundamentals. So they knew they could like do the IPO. They've been preparing it for a while. He said the timing was not great because obviously the market, like I think like the tariff announcement happened the same day that they were like released their S1 or something crazy like that. They're like, let's just do it.
Yeah, just go for it.
I
love that mentality.
So it was good. But yeah, I mean, speaking with like the tariffs and like the boom and all of this, it was definitely like a year of like haves and have-nots also, like just in venture in general. Like there's such a concentration of the capital in very few companies, and so for some companies it's really hard to raise capital, and for others it just seems that like you put AI in the name and they're getting like all of the money even with very little traction. So it's very bifurcated for sure.
It's wild, and I do think we'll get into this, but I think there will be a reckoning at some point for some of that. But and we've definitely seen some challenges here and there, even in our own portfolio with some struggling to raise and some raising extremely fast. And then I think there's also been an interesting just insight in like looking at the companies that were kind of launched pre-AI and then companies that have had to adapt to this new AI era, and then companies that were built post-AI. So they're like AI native. And so there's a lot of different like things that I think made some of them able to navigate it and some of them not able to navigate it. But
first builders.
That is definitely a theme. Like, they're very, very nimble. And we've talked with multiple podcast guests about how being adaptable is probably the most important skill for being in one of those fast-paced environments, whether you're an early operator or a founder. So I think that's a huge common point between the founders that have done well through this period. But then I also think like being focused on infrastructure and solving problems that mattered pre-AI has allowed them to just layer on AI and have that be accelerating things rather than just building AI for the sake of building it and then going out and pitching that. So I think you're able to lead with real traction if you can actually solve a real problem. So
yeah, definitely. And it was interesting to kind of see it also in our portfolio. Like we actually had this theme during one of our meetings. It was at our AGM where companies were talking about just like signing a contract doesn't always mean that they're like very successful. They have to get from like the contracted ARR to live ARR as an example, right? They have to actually implement, and that can be a lot longer than they anticipate. Sometimes founders get caught up, I think, like in just like the sale itself, and they're like, oh, phew, we signed the contract, like we're good to go. And it's like, no, that's probably just like the first step really. And you need to get like that implementation going, and then you need to get like the users to love what you're doing as well.
Yeah. So. And I think in prior years, like it used to be a big deal to get a paid pilot with an enterprise level customer. And the bar was a lot higher because they would say no, like 99.9% of the time, because it's not worth their time to try a new tool when they have a huge business already running and doing well. And And so I think we're seeing like unprecedented adoption of like initial trials of startups and AI companies, because all these bigger companies are getting pressure put on them like, hey, you need to be part of this AI movement or you're going to get left behind. And so it's being talked about in boardrooms and on leadership teams. And so then you end up with people like, you know, trying out AI on their team just to show that they're trying out AI on their team, and they might not be trying out the right
one.
Products. Yeah.
The right one, or like even the right use case, like of what to like actually have AI do. And I think like in addition to like enterprise leadership, like almost mandating AI, I think everyone is just hearing about it in the news a lot. You know, oftentimes like a lot of people are using it themselves, like at least like from like just replacing Google to like using ChatGPT as a new thing other than Google. And so I think it's just much more prevalent. And obviously we live in San Francisco, so we are surrounded. Yes. We're surrounded by it a lot more, but I'm always am surprised by like, you know, just like how often we're hearing about this from people outside of like, you know, San Francisco as well, and how willing they are to adopt a new technology much more than I feel like other technologies in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then within the industrial space, so if you might remember, we invest in kind of 3 different areas at the council. And all of it is really like AI applied into vertical spaces. But if you look at those vertical spaces we're investing in, it's part industrial tech, part healthcare, and then part what we call critical functions. And those are areas like customer success and law. But within industrial tech, I think some of the trends that we've seen is that like you have to be nuanced and specific about the use case you're solving and the customer you're building for, because there are so many generic tools out there. Like now everyone is building a sales tool, everybody is building an inventory management tool, everybody's building a forecasting tool and a purchasing tool and all that stuff. And so how you can really set yourself apart as a startup and as a company is by like focusing on something you uniquely understand very well and know how to speak that customer's language, know exactly what their workflows are day to day and how you can make those better. We've definitely seen that with GCAI and the like the critical function space, but also in industrial tech. Like if you look at Dirac, they're helping manufacturers convert 3D CAD models into work instructions instantly, which used to be a multi-day or multi-week process. And that's allowing and freeing up manufacturing engineers and design engineers to do other work that they enjoy doing more. And so, but if I look at like the commonalities there and with some other companies we've invested in like ag tech and other areas, it's that nuance. Like, you know, we have one company, Lomi, that's building at the intersection of agriculture and supply chain. Not many people understand that, so not as many people are building for that. And then with Dirac's case, it's manufacturing at the intersection of design and engineering tools. So I think if you're thinking about founding a company today in an industrial tech space, you have to get more specific and then make sure that specific area is a big enough market that makes it worth tackling.
Totally.
And then we've also seen a lot of companies doing well if they're starting with like mid-market size customers and moving up through enterprise. But companies have struggled a little bit more when they're working with like a long tail of SMB customers. And that's a risk when you're building in an area like manufacturing, because there are a lot of smaller manufacturers out there. Same with logistics. There's a lot of third-party logistics providers out there. And so you just have to think about like, how do I kind of either onboard customers in hordes through different channel strategies, or how do I go for a bigger type of customer and lead with that versus waste a lot of time on a customer base that might be churning more often because they're smaller and more unpredictable. So I think that's just like one of the trends that we've seen. But these areas have been very hot to invest in. Like when I started the council, everybody was investing in Web3 and they were like, you're crazy for investing in industrial tech and manufacturing is super boring. And now everybody's really excited about it.
It's the hot thing to invest in now, I feel
Which is cool. Like I'm glad that I'm glad there's going to be capital flowing toward these areas and that founders are wanting to build for them. But I do think like, you know, if you're thinking about building in one of these areas, make sure it's an area you understand and that you have some sort of unique insight and workflow that you're going to be building for.
Totally. I mean, I think it's like definitely always true, but especially when you're in an area that's like really hot at the moment as well.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to see kind of like all of these trends, and also because I don't have a lot of industrial tech background, like getting to learn a lot of that like through the past year too. Yeah. So it's been awesome. But yeah, on the healthcare side, I would say there's been so many changes this year. I think especially because it feels like there's always new policies that's like being dropped almost every month. Like you're having to keep up with so much. I mean, there's obviously some of the big ones, like the One Big Beautiful Bill and the downstream effects. That's kind of like the big headline for Medicaid. And obviously there's gonna be a lot of challenges and implications from that, especially since like, there's going to be rural communities and hospitals that are not going to get like the funding that they used to, so they may shut down and cause healthcare deserts. But then, even still within that bill, there are some bright spots for healthcare, such as having direct primary care access, still with like your HSA dollars, which was like previously you weren't able to have that benefit before. And then I would say like, one of the other things too is that there's a lot more innovation programs that are coming out. And I think just like in the last couple of months, and I think just last week, there is like one that's called Maha Elevate, but other programs like Access that can be really powerful tailwinds for digital health. And I personally think this will be like another signal in that kind of like the integration of like wellness and longevity on like one side of the spectrum with actually healthcare and more integration of that, which I'm really excited to see. And then the last thing I would say too, like just for health insurance in general, like, there's a lot of the ACA subsidies going away in the marketplace. And so it's going to be a lot more expensive for people to have health insurance, next year. And so just like looking into what kind of solutions there will be for that, and hopefully founders that are kind of like thinking about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into just predictions for 2026. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, man. I mean, hopefully not another tariff situation.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, like that's like, but what do I think is going to happen? So I think like one of the things is definitely like, we've had like just like the AI boom, and then I think this year like agentic AI, right? I feel like it's like the new like thing where it's not just like asking AI to do like the answers for something, but actually having AI do something for you. But then because AI can just sift through all of this information and it can be much more specialized or customized, I'm excited to kind of like see more of those types of solutions going out there for complex industries like healthcare, like, industrial tech, like the ones that like really required like complex and nuanced workflows.
Yeah.
That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about, I think there's going to be more verticalization and just specialization increasing. Like, we talk about this a lot. There's this weird parallel between tech-enabled services on the healthcare side and tech-enabled infrastructure on the industrial tech side. But really, like, what it means is there's this sort of like high-cost operation running with either a brick-and-mortar presence like a factory or physical clinics for doctors. But then there's this technology and this software that can scale exponentially if that infrastructure is working well. And ideally in a way such that the costs are not, expanding directly with the revenue that's coming in. Yeah. And so I think we're seeing more and more tech-enabled services on the healthcare side, but also even on the industrial side. Like, we just invested in Knox Metals that is focused on building a system of factories that can produce next-day metals similar to how you would order on Amazon, which is currently not the standard across the industry right now. Right now, it's way cheaper and way faster to just order those parts from China. And so I think just the fact that somebody had that insight and went really deep on it, I think makes a difference. And so I think, and when you're kind of owning an entire operation in addition to the software that is allowing it to expand so fast, you just have more control over factors, that maybe like gatekeepers and things like that in these old school industries. And so I think we're just seeing more like vertical integration in general. So I'm excited for more of that. And you were talking about earlier, like AI is allowing you to customize so easily for all these use cases.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe that's like our optimistic prediction. Sure. I think our pessimistic prediction could be more around like, what's going to happen with this like AI boom that's going to happen or that's happening already. Are we in a bubble? Everyone's talking about this bubble. And I think there is potential for some of that to start like actually developing, and we'll probably see some of the effects of that.
Yeah.
Especially like with these pilots that have been happening. If the pilots are not successful, that company's not going to be successful, right?
Yeah. So, and I think probably like only the top 1%, like when all is said and done, all these pilots are happening right now. Some already haven't been renewed, but I think there's going to be a reckoning moment, like maybe in Q1 next year, maybe Q2, where there's like, it's like everybody steps back and it's like, wow, we canceled like 99% of the AI tools that we were using, and we're no longer spending those thousands of dollars there. And then it's going to call into question the entire AI industry, even though the AI technology is real. There's going to be a moment where it's like, whoa, are the valuations too high?
Yeah. What is it real for also, right?
Exactly.
Like I think there's going to be a much more like matching to like the use case rather than just technology for technology's sake.
Yes.
I think that like right now it seems like it's the technology for technology's sake in a lot of like what we're seeing just generally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think like another, just like switching gears, another trend we're excited about in 2026 that we saw a little bit of in 2025 is just the consumerization of everything. Like, you know, of course we invest in B2B software, but we're seeing more and more consumer plays come in terms of how companies are growing their go-to-market. So, you know, even in GCAI's case, like they're building for lawyers, they're selling to lawyers. It's a product-led growth roadmap, and you know they can shift into enterprise from there. But they've already been able to acquire enterprise customers through that strategy, and so we've seen that like kind of across the board with our startups as well. And I think you just have to remember it's always been true, but I think now more than ever you're selling to a person, not just a company, and the more you can like, and it allows for like viral scale if you can do it right. So
if you can do it right. I mean, it goes back to what we were even talking about earlier, like the things that go viral. So if you figure out like what makes sense for what you're building and the type of user that you're going for, like whether it's, you know, lawyers like GCAI, or we have like Flex that's selling
small
to business owners. Yeah.
Or big business owners.
Exactly. Big business owners and small business owners. Like what is their problem that they're really trying to solve for? And then creating your strategy and distribution around that, like that's going to be really exciting to see. So I'm excited about all of that in 2026.
Yep. Well, we launched this episode 1 week sooner so that we could take off a week for the holidays from the publishing the podcast. So our next episode is going to be on January 6th in 2 weeks. So we're going to stay on the biweekly cadence and we will see you then. And in the meantime, we hope that if you like First Builders, that you will leave us a review if you haven't yet, and definitely share it with a friend you think could enjoy it. That really means a lot to us, and it helps us grow our presence and meet more people that might actually want to found companies in our thesis.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening, and see you guys next year.
Thank you.